Ron, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Mike. Merry Christmas.
Good. And to you. Are you more discouraged by yesterday, the fact that the bill was even presented as it was, or are you more encouraged by the fact that the people shut it down?
Oh, I'm certainly glad that that bill's not going to pass. I've been supportive of and championing a bill called Preventing Government Shutdown Act when I was chairman of Homeland Security. Told my committee, let's give me proposals. In the end, we passed the Langford-Hassan bill, which we just spend at last year's levels until we can get our act together. It's a clean CR. There's some issues with it. You have to be able to allow the Pentagon to continue some of their projects and programs. But this is insanity and dysfunction here. But unfortunately, the Democrats hold all the cards. They have all the leverage because the legacy corporate media is always on their side, no matter how much they're at fault for resisting some reasonable fiscal controls. So we stop mortgaging our kids' future. If the government shuts down, the Republicans are going to get blamed. So, from my standpoint, just avoid it. But don't load up continuing resolutions with a bunch of crap. And that's what ended up happening. And it's good that continuing resolution is not going to see the light of day.
I don't understand how Democrats have leverage. Can you help me understand that? Speaker Johnson and others say, well, we needed Democrat votes. Why?
Well, because we have Republicans that simply will not vote for a continuing resolution. They just won't. They're just utterly opposed to it. And so he needs some Democrat votes in the House. I don't envy Speaker Johnson's position. It's a tough position. But, rather than negotiate with Democrats behind closed doors, what he ought to be doing is just laying it out for the public. Say, listen, what we're going to do here is we're going to just pass a clean continuing resolution. We're going to spend at last year's levels. We're not going to load any junk onto it. We are just all about avoiding a shutdown until we can get our act together, go and win the political argument. It drives me nuts. I'm an accountant, but I'm basically a sales guy, and you have to sell what your program is. And what Republicans' program is here is we're trying to prevent the bankrupting of this country, the mortgage of our children's future. And we don't like shutdowns either. So we're willing to go along with just last year's spending, but we don't want to junk it up with a bunch of special interest crap. And
okay, I got a question.
To me, that's pretty easy argument to win.
I would think so. Tom Tiffany said the same thing. All right, he blamed the conservatives, Republicans who don't want any continuing resolution. Okay, why not? And I don't know who those people are. Maybe he'll tell us off the air, and maybe you can let us know. I don't know who these Republicans are who are dead set against it. But why not negotiate with those Republicans? Right, because I imagine, let's say there's some super principled conservative who is against a continuing resolution. So why not go to that guy and be like, hey, man, listen, I'll tell you what. In this continuing resolution, we'll do something you want, like cut spending or remove this program. Negotiate with those guys instead of going and negotiating with the Democrats.
Yeah, no, I agree. And by the way, that's what Rick Scott, Mike Lee, and myself do with the House Freedom Caucus, which is why we got past the last debt ceiling. That was week after week after week meeting at Rick Scott's townhouse, and finally talking it through, saying, well, if we don't propose something, if we're not willing to vote for an increase in the debt ceiling, which none of us have ever voted for, we're just going to get a clean increase in debt ceiling. We'll get nothing for it. So it was literally the House Freedom Caucus that stepped up to the plate, proposed something, compromised with the conference, gave McCarthy leverage into those talks, and then McCarthy just frittered all that leverage away by not negotiating $1.5 trillion increase to debt ceiling. He just suspended it, which now Trump is going to have to deal with that in mid-January, and he's not happy with that either, and I don't blame him. But no, okay. You do. The problem is if you get the spending cuts some people want, then the deficit hawks, or again, it's tough. It's very difficult. I mean, for example, tax reform. The New York congressional delegation is holding salt over everybody's head. We're not going to vote for any tax reform that doesn't repeal the salt provisions. Well, disallowing the deduction for state and local income taxes, with that, we stopped funding governments like New York and California. The American taxpayers are, in effect, funding those liberal states. So that's a good thing, but if you're a member of Congress in those states, you're pretty dug in about eliminating that
Yes.
limitation. So, no,
Yes.
again, governing is hard. It's not easy, but it should start always with win the political argument. Take your case to the American people. And, again, I think you put forward a clean CR. Are Democrats really going to shut down the government if while we're saying we're just going to spend on last year's level? Let's keep this simple. Okay, we're going to lose some, but, I mean, most of us are voting for it. If you're all voting against it, hey, liberal media, you got to blame the people who aren't voting with us to continue the government operation. And by the way,
Yes.
I listened to your commercial ahead of time. The government doesn't shut down. A very limited amount that nobody even noticed if it weren't for a couple kind of poison provisions. For example, the Coast Guard doesn't get paid. Customs and Border Patrol doesn't get paid. So let's fix that. I had a bill, just the Shutdown Fairness Act, that takes care of those folks. So quite honestly, these shutdowns where you have it's a single-digit percent of federal government that actually shuts down. And when you've got, according to Joni Ernst, only 6% of federal workers coming into the office, I don't think the American public can even notice that less than 10% of the federal government's all of a sudden not operating.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned the debt ceiling. So J.D. Vance and Trump tweeted this out yesterday. I don't know what this means. So let me quote this paragraph. They said the most foolish and inept thing ever done by congressional Republicans was allowing our country to hit the debt ceiling in 2025. It was a mistake and is now something that must be addressed. Meanwhile, Congress is considering a spending bill that would give sweetheart provisions to government censors and for Liz Cheney. Let's see. Here we go. Increasing the debt ceiling is not great, but we'd rather do it on Biden's watch. If Democrats won't cooperate on the debt ceiling now, what makes anyone think they'll do it in June during our administration? Let's have the debate now. I don't know what they're talking about. What's going on there?
Well, again, from my standpoint,
like what do you mean debt ceiling now versus in Trump's administration, or what's the timing issue?
It's supposed to concentrate everybody's mind on the fact that we are mortgaging our children's future. So it's one of the very few fiscal controls. Now, what's happened is Congress after Congress after Congress just increases it without instituting any fiscal controls, or like McCarthy did, just suspended it. So I actually think we ought to use the debt ceiling. But again, we got it. In 2011 when I got here, that was the first time that we had a debt ceiling fight, and I came up with what I called a debt ceiling budget. Now, you fund the things so that you don't go into default. We have more than enough revenue coming into the federal government that we won't go into default. We have more than enough revenue to pay Social Security recipients. I mean, that's what your trust fund's about, to pay for Medicare. It's a matter of managing the revenue we get in, and then you don't fund what you don't have revenue for. So there's absolutely no danger of actually defaulting, but that's where everybody, the big danger here. So again, I'd like to talk to both President Trump and Vice President-elect Vance, and talk to them. There's a way to manage this, and there's a reason we have a debt limit. It's supposed to result in additional fiscal controls, but it hasn't been used that way for as long as I've been here, quite honestly. McConnell never wanted leverage in these spending fights, and so we still don't have leverage. And as long as the legacy media backs the Democrats, again, we're still going to be in a weakened position when it comes to these types of fiscal cliffs.
I think the power of the media is shifting from that legacy media to X and the rest. So hopefully that power continues to dwindle. So what do you think JD and Trump want, ideally, perfect world, Speaker Johnson to do with the debt ceiling now before January 20th? What would that perfect scenario look like?
Well, the perfect scenario would have been to actually pass appropriation bills and have fiscal year 2025 funded. Should have been funded before September 30th. I'm sure they'd like to have it funded before January 20th, so they don't have to deal with fiscal year 2025. We'll be 4 months into it at that point in time. And they'd rather not have to deal with the debt ceiling. I disagree with them on that. They should relish dealing with the debt ceiling and instituting additional fiscal controls and putting pressure on Democrats. But you have to have a smart strategy. But you're exactly right, by the way. What is completely different nowadays is we have the bullhorn that is Elon Musk and Vivek and X. And we actually have an election pretty well run on dramatically reducing the size, scope, and cost of government. That's what was appealing to so many people. They realize how ineffective government is, how as it grows, our freedoms are reduced. And that's what this election was about. So let's actually fight for reduced government. I mean, again, you just suspend the debt ceiling again, you have nothing to fight with. So
right.
again, you got to use what leverage you've got. That's one of the few leverage points we have.
Well, the leverage that I guess is being thrown at us is we have to pass this because it has a farm bill in it. And it's like, well, hold on, geez, you just threw this at me. I don't know what a farm. What do you mean farm bill? Well, it's for the farmers. Okay, but like what?
It's a food stamp bill. 80% of the farm bill is funding for food stamps, and Obama dramatically increased eligibility. It used to be, in prosperous times, maybe 6% of the population was on food stamps. Then recessions, you go up to 12, 13. Pretty well stuck at that higher limit nowadays because we pay people not to work. Well, let's be honest, we pay people not to work. Our welfare benefits are very generous. People don't pay taxes on them. We have a huge transfer of wealth from working Americans to people who don't work. And we're a compassionate society. We want to help people who can't help themselves. We want to help people help themselves. But we've created a far too large dependent class. That's got to end. We need to get people off the couch. They've got to enter the workforce to grow our economy.
You said it was maybe 6%, maybe up to 13% on food stamps back in the day. What is it now?
I don't have that. I'm a little vague because I haven't looked at that number exactly. But it's probably in the 10-12% range, probably.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not even a farmer's bill.
No.
That's why the Democrats are for it. I got two more questions in about 2 more minutes. What is a two-step reconciliation process that you want?
So we first deliver on President Trump's major campaign promise, both in 2016 and 2024, secure the border. So the simplest way to do that is provide 4 years worth of funding for him to do that. Build the wall, build the infrastructure he needs to detain and then deport people that come to this country illegally, that we catch, the criminals, detain them, finally deport them. So that's going to cost money, probably about $100 billion. And the simpler we keep it, the easier it's going to pass. Pass that, give the president a win very early on, late January, early February, then turn our attention to the far more complex reconciliation package, which is the primary goal of that is prevent a massive automatic tax increase that we're facing because when we passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we didn't make it permanent. And we should.
Ridiculous.
So this next one should be permanent. No matter what we do, the tax law has to be permanent.